Good morning, everyone. I am excited to have this session with Brooks and Dr. Anthony Chang. And I know a lot of you guys know Dr. Chang, but if you don't, you're in a big surprise. He is an amazing person, both friend, mentor. Honestly, I'm honored to just have this opportunity to be with him. Many time in our careers, we meet certain people that really push us and make us think. And one of my favorite phrases that he says is, "We need to be bilingual." And when he first said it, I said, "Well, I'm already bilingual. I speak Spanish, I speak English." And he's like, "No, Harvey, we need bilingual in AI." And I'm like, "Oh, I get it." And so I want to let him introduce himself. Dr. Anthony Chang, tell us about yourself.
You're very kind, Harvey. So I'm a practicing pediatric cardiologist. As a matter of fact, after this show, I have a day, a whole day clinic of about 15, 20 kids to see with their family. So it's a privilege to still be practicing as a doctor, but also try to learn artificial intelligence from smart people like you and Brooks, and try to have some relevance and practical use of AI in our daily lives. So it's a real pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Well, honored to have you. And then Brooks, I want to introduce him. You know, in life, as we move forward, a lot of us that are healthcare professionals, we see the world a certain way, and we want to fix the world, and we have that compassionate heart. He's not a doctor, but he has that same compassion to help. But the privilege that I have to work with him is that he's using technology. How can we leverage AI? How can we create tools to better humanity? And so, Brooks, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, thanks, gentlemen. I'm really honored to be able to work with you both. Um, as you mentioned, I'm not a doctor, but I feel that from a healthcare perspective, from an AI perspective, from a technology perspective, that's really where my intersection lies. And I'm just really excited to really get all this type of technology out there and really work out on how we can help people. So thank you guys, really appreciate it.
Cool. And so I'm going to welcome everybody and start right off the bat. Please post all your comments. We're going to look at them. Obviously, we're going to share them. Take advantage. I'm not going to say how many years of wisdom are here, but there's a lot when you add all three of us, our years of experience. But the special part of today is we're going to look at just all of it, healthcare, law, but then let's throw in technology and we'll go into the different things. I'll just start off asking some questions. You know, for me, one of the core lessons that I learned early in my career is, how do I see a patient and not be biased? I'll give you a quick example. Often the nurse would come to me and say, "Oh, Dr. Castro, it's Miss Jones, and she has been here like every week. You don't know Miss Jones? She always comes in with the same thing. So just here, write the prescription and I'll send her out." And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Let me see the patient. Let me make that diagnosis. Let me see, because what if today is a day that she's having something wrong? What if all the other ones were the same thing, but today is different? And so that's a quick example of how bias can be introduced. And obviously, knowing that you're watching two people that are into AI and healthcare, obviously bias is a big thing. So, Dr. Chang, I know that's just one quick little pearl on the AI and law part of it, or I'm sorry, medical and law. What kind of things do you want to share with us?
Well, thanks, Harvey. So I had the privilege of serving as a medical expert since 1990. So that's 35 years of being in this domain of medicine and legal work. And I find it very rewarding. Some doctors don't like to do this line of work, especially with the pressure of depositions and court appearances. But actually, because I'm a cardiac intensivist, I'm perhaps a little bit more tolerant of pressure to perform under circumstances that may not be particularly friendly. But I think overall, it's a great line of work. It's extra income for some of the doctors that might find it helpful. It's also rewarding in terms of understanding medicine and law for your own practice. There's some misconceptions out there, Harvey. One is, and I just had someone answer this yesterday, that most people think the standard of care, for instance, is what the majority of doctors in your field would do under that circumstance. But in fact, it's not. It's really more about what a reasonably prudent doctor would do under the circumstances. Now, that's interesting now with artificial intelligence, as you know, because with artificial intelligence now for certain situations, particularly brain imaging, in the hospital setting, it is now probably considered standard of care to have an AI tool available to help you screen and prioritize the reading. So there's some ongoing legal activity in that area for the lawyers who are here to know. There's because there's no really index case right now. So it's interesting development. So we might see a case where a hospital or a physician is being sued for non-use of AI, that's how we call it, than the use of AI, because everyone's talking about the use of AI and legal activity. So it's a very interesting time in terms of doctors and lawyers traveling in this domain of medical legal work, and particularly talking about AI, but also using AI. And I know we'll go into that in a minute.
Oh, that's well said. It's real deep. I just gonna repeat what you said. So basically, the standard of care is what's held in your area, right? Is that what you're kind of saying? Like, if
No,
what
it's
would be expected of me to do in
no
that particular setting?
what a reasonably and these are generic words, but what a reasonably prudent clinician in your subspecialty would do. It's not the majority as what a lot of people think. A lot of people think it's more than 50% of the practitioners in your area. It's actually not. It's just any reasonably prudent doctor. So it could be a practice that a minority of practitioners do, but if it's a reasonably prudent clinician doing something, then that can be accepted as standard of care. Obviously, lawyers on both sides will debate that, but it's not more than 50%. And even if it is, Harvey, for brain imaging, I think the more than 50% of hospitals now have brain imaging with an AI tool backing it up for screening and prioritization.
Yeah, well said. And so, from the AI point of view, if I'm looking at these tools, how can I screen for biases and this kind of stuff? Because obviously, if the bias is introduced and it's in my algorithm, then and then that might light me up for a malpractice.
Right. Well, because the physician still has the final say in interpreting a medical image or making a medical decision, that the manufacturer of the AI tool, for instance, right now is less vulnerable to a medical legal suit being named as a party, but rather they're going to be under the manufacturer's faulty claim area. So it's a different domain in terms of how they're liable. But I'm sure it's a matter of time before an AI service or a company is going to be named as a co-defendant in a legal suit, but we're just not seeing that. And I think they're more vulnerable to manufacturing faulty claim area than a medical legal defendant.
No, that makes sense. And so, with that line of argument, could you say that some countries that are promoting, let's just say, AI as their PCP, I read an article, I forget what country it was, and they were saying that you go to the clinic and it's all AI, there's no human. I would think some situation like that, you could blame the manufacturer because it's really pushing it all on the manufacturer, not there's no human there in the loop in a way.
Yeah, the issue, Harvey, is not the blaming. The blaming will be on the AI service, as you said. It's just under what medical legal domain is that going to go under? Is it going to be under malpractice, or is it going to be under manufacturing faulty claims? So I think it's going to be more the latter in the U.S. And I think in other countries, perhaps it'll be more the former. But right now, it's not under the medical legal malpractice claim.
Got it. That makes sense. This is why I love talking to you for many reasons, but the way I see it is, there's this wisdom that you have that maybe someone that just started may not have, right? And so how do you see if we could just use your brain and then let's throw in AI together? How could we use these tools to help us?
Yeah, thank you for the kind words. Is as they say, good judgment comes from experience, but experience comes from bad judgment. I'm sure I had bad judgment for 35 years, but hopefully less and less as the years have gone by. But I was encouraged to do medical legal work because from one of my mentors, actually. And I'd be curious to hear stories from our audience in terms of doctors getting involved in medical legal work, because I would say a significant percentage of doctors just don't like to do this kind of work, because it's dealing with lawyers, dealing with uncertainty, dealing with being, grilled in depositions and trials. They just rather not have that level of stress. But I think, once you get used to, and by the way, the lawyers have been much, much better about having a higher level etiquette in depositions and even in court. So I think an easier environment to work in than 25, 30 years ago, when things could be pretty, pretty brutal and bordering on not being civilized. But I think right now is a good time to get involved in this work, and it makes you a better doctor. I think understanding the law better, understanding what is malpractice, right? Because I think some clinicians have trouble understanding what's malpractice. It's combination of harm to the patient in terms of death or injury or complication, and also you have to have causality, right? That's something you did that caused the harm. And so sometimes as an expert witness, and we can just talk about expert witness work in general, not just in relating to AI, but you have to prove the harm and then the causality. And sometimes you get asked to do just the causality, without the breach of standard of care. So there's two parts of it. One is breach of standard of care. Again, standard of care is defined as, what a reasonably prudent clinician would do under that circumstance. And then you have to prove that. And then you have to prove the cause. And sometimes you'll get asked just to do the cause. Don't worry about the breach of standard of care. Let's say there's an ER, you're an ER doc, right, Harvey? So
Yes, sir.
let's say there's a case that involves a misdiagnosis in an emergency room setting. Now, as a pediatric cardiologist, even if it's a pediatric cardiac case, I'm not going to be able to comment, on the standard of care of an ER physician. You would be in that position. But I would be in a position to prove the causality, like because of the misdiagnosis, that led to a cardiac complication and led to injury. So that would be my job as a pediatric cardiologist. But I would not be able to, unless it's very general terms, I would not be able to comment and prove that the standard of care has been breached. So sometimes an expert witness will just do the causality rather than a breach of standard of care, but oftentimes it's both.
Got it. Well, I appreciate that. For some reason, it's not showing up on our side, so I couldn't paste. Dr. Rahavi says, this is an excellent podcast. Thank you. And then this is the question he's asking us. How can healthcare professionals best protect themselves from malpractice claims in today's litigious environment? So what can we do, Doc?
Well, I think, yeah, as I was alluding to earlier, Harvey, I think just understanding the different components of what would make a malpractice suit is a good start. But I think ultimately the greatest defense, I think, for any clinician is just be very, very detail oriented in what you discuss with families. And also, if there's an error or complication, really spend time to explain that to the families and the patients themselves. It's just almost being, as transparent as you can be. And obviously, you talk to your risk management entity in your hospital. Almost all hospitals will have a risk management person or division that you should talk to if there's any doubt in your mind whether or not this could something that you did or something that you didn't do, I should say, could lead to a medical malpractice suit, and just get educated on how to best protect yourself. But I think transparency and honesty and candor and relationship is what ultimately will be the pillars of, I think, defending against a malpractice suit.
Yeah,
talk to I was going to say, talk to clinicians who almost never been sued, and what do they do right, right? But there are subspecialties that are particularly high in the malpractice area.
Yeah.
OBGYN, some surgical subspecialties, some ICU and anesthesia subspecialties.
Yeah, no, I love that recommendation, and I chuckle because maybe they just haven't been sued yet, but just kidding.
Yeah.
No, but on the serious side, yes, I love what you said. At one point, I managed 40 physicians, and one of the main things I told them is like, hey, in high pressure situations in ER and you're trying to rush, don't rush. Do your best to really spend time with the patient. I'd get complaints often that the doctor wouldn't sit down with the patient, that they were diagnosing at the door and they're being quick. And I was like, man, that's going to set you up for a lawsuit. Something happens and
Yeah.
you were just really callous. And so I love what you said about the empathy and caring and being transparent with patients when you mess up. Hey, this is what happened and this is what's going on. And but let me add one layer, just because obviously you and I are in AI every day and we text each other on AI. I really love this phrase. We don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
And if you take that to the next level, if there's a doctor, they think they're the best doctor with bedside manners, but maybe not. And so I'm going to challenge people to consider, you're going to be like, oh, that's interesting. Consider AI to increase your empathy. Consider recording yourself and make sure it's HIPAA compliant and all that stuff. And then there are models that can look at you. What was your tone? What were the words? How did you deliver those news? And then
Yeah.
have AI help you on your presentation, on your tact, how you talk to patients, how you lean in. I think that's a good recommendation also. Just
Yeah.
that aside.
And there's some evidence for that now, Harvey, because there are at least couple of surveys and reports that an AI chatbot is actually more empathetic, thought to be more empathetic by patients, thought to be much more comprehensive in their recommendations than clinicians. And I'm totally guilty of that, Harvey, because I give every patient my cell phone number. And on a busy day, my answer to that patient's question may be very short. And it's not because I don't want to be more comprehensive, but I'm in the middle of a busy clinic. I can just do my best to get back to our patients. And even though I think a good gesture is to give your patients and families your cell phone, that may not be the most effective tool. But I'm thinking, I just talked about this last night when I talked to our summit interns, is that I think in the future, also as a protection against medical legal work, but just for quality of care, that we're going to be communicating with our patients both directly from us in a personal note, but also with an AI tool that can supplement what we're talking about, perhaps explaining, what to look for in after a certain procedure or what to expect in the progression of a disease. We may not have, time to put in paragraphs and by the way, for each individual patient, you may not be able to do that in a busy day if you're getting a lot of texts. But certainly an AI tool can help you with that.
Yeah. I'm gonna throw the next question. Nikki Estes, thank you for your question. And I know her. I know she's not a physician or in healthcare, but this is a great question for her asking. Her question is, how do you prove causality, and what does that really mean, Doc?
Great question. Sometimes the simplest questions are the most complicated to answer. Causality is, one action directly leading to another observation. So, causality is not as hardcore as data science and correlation. um, Data science and even in the best AI tools now can show you correlation. A and B are correlated, there's a pattern, but it's harder to prove causality. And we're working on AI tools that will prove causality a little bit better than what we have now. But unless books tell me differently, right now, most of the tools are just correlation, and when they find a pattern, there's no really causality. I'll give you a day-to-day example that I usually use. So it's now summertime in most of the U.S. and the weather is hot, and there's increased ice cream sales because it's hotter weather. Now you could say the you can say the hotter weather led to is the cause of increased ice cream sales, or it could just be that for some reason that month the ice cream sales went up. You can't really directly say one action led to the other observation, but you can say that it probably is, but you can't say with 100% certainty, because especially if you're looking at an individual case like an individual store, you don't know that maybe that store just opened and had a grand opening sale, or that there's a big promotion for the mall that they're in. I mean, there could be multiple reasons why the sales went up that month, not just the summer weather. So although it is probably the summer weather, but you can't prove that, 100% because there could be many other factors that are involved. So that's what I mean by a correlation is much easier to show than causality. Causality is something that we're working on with other AI tools, but it'll be a while before we have AI tools that are good enough to actually to help you with causality.
Got it. And I'm just gonna throw in this tip. So I would tell my docs that I was managing, like, I'll just read it. Your best defense in courts don't just judge your memories; they judge the chart. And when you and I went to med school, it was always like, well, you could have done it, but if you didn't document it, you didn't do it, and you can't charge for it. So you need to document. Same thing
Yeah.
with this. So let's teach.
Can I just add something to that, Harvey?
Yes, sir.
The documentation, you're absolutely right. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. and a lot of times, because I do medical legal work on both sides, both defense and plaintiff. So what I found is that, first of all, if you say that, I examined the heart, I just didn't document it, that's going to be a very weak defense. On the other hand, if you document it a lot and there's no substance that you actually did everything, and I think, Harvey, I was telling you that in a recent ER visit, the doctor didn't even touch me, never mind examining me. So there's
I'm
a
still
lot
waiting
of
for that guy's phone number so I can
yes,
go after him.
there's a lot of that going on now where the doctors are barely examining if they even touch you. So just because you cut and paste the normal physical exam from the EHR, it doesn't mean that you absolutely did it. But having it documented means that it's harder to prove that you didn't do something. But just because you document, so the corollary to that is, ironically, just because you documented that doesn't mean you did it. But it's the burden of proof is going to be on both sides to demonstrate through depositions and how you present your case in front of a jury, whether or not you did it or not. Because sometimes let's say the family might say, I was in the room and the doctor came in and never touched, my son or, my grandfather. So that is the burden of proof that can actually come back to haunt you if you document it, because then you're going to look like you over documented, and that you didn't do some of the things that you documented. So documentation, you're absolutely right, usually will work for the defense, but it potentially can backfire on you if there's a pattern of over documentation and now the defendant looks like he or she is not telling the truth, because the family member might say, I was there. He never really looked in the ears. And the kid has an ear infection that led to a sinusitis that led to meningitis and died. But the burden of proof it will be on the plaintiff side trying to refute the fact that despite documentation, that the examination wasn't done. So it can work both ways. But you're right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Usually a documentation means that you have done that, particularly with vital signs in emergency room setting. That's the most common sort of situation that, documentation of vital signs wasn't there. And even if it was done, if it's not documented, then it's much easier to say that it just wasn't done in the first place.
Yeah. And so the second part to that, and I'm just going to add to what you just said. So avoid late cleanups. It becomes pretty obvious if you put an entry like 2 weeks later or after you're being sued for it, and then you're all suddenly putting everything that you said you did and you didn't. So I would always encourage my doctors to document in real time as much as they could and not later. And then I do love this last part. Make sure that decision shared process is documented in plain language. Make sure that if you and your patient have agreed to a plan, that you document it. Here's a quick example. In the ER, sometimes we would say, follow up with the cardiologist and make sure you do that in the next 72 hours. And sometimes we actually make that appointment for them if it was during business hours. But document that, because if you didn't document it, then it didn't happen. Just to play devil's advocate, this is a device that records. And I tell patients and when I do talks that these things are going to become more common in the workroom, in the clinic, in the emergency room, where patients are recording. And my worry with this, it's a double-edged sword. On one side, it's documenting everything. And when the patient gets home, they're like, oh, we talked about this and that was a plan, and they can remember. And the second part that I'm more worried about is in that transcript, I could argue that it'd be easy to manipulate that and erase things or add things into that. So that's going to be another malpractice, I think, in the future that we need to be aware of.
It's kind of like the body cam problem that public officials have, and service
Yes.
people have, is it can protect you, but it can also work against you, right? So you have to. But I think overall, as you were saying earlier, Harvey, I think we're not as empathetic as we might think. And there are certain things that you can do in whatever practice that you're in. Sometimes they say the 2 or 3 things that really matter to patients and families are the things that we don't do, right? One is, and so many healthcare workers are guilty of this, they walk into a room, they don't really introduce themselves, or if they introduce themselves, they only do it to the patient. They don't, or the parent, they don't do it to everyone in the room. And one of the things I always do when I come into a room is know exactly who everyone is and why they're there, right? Because it takes less than a minute, but it's really a good investment in terms of building that relationship. Two
Yeah.
is actually sit down. A lot of doctors, and most doctors are guilty of this. They walk into a room or a clinic in an ER or the ER. They don't sit down. They're standing the whole time. And that relationship is hard to build when you're not eye to eye level with the patient. And the third thing is we always interrupt. So when a patient, I don't know if people know this statistic is kind of a fun factoid. Guess the amount of time that the doctors will let the patient speak before the doctor interrupts the patient. Does anyone, maybe in the chat, you can put how much time goes by before a clinician stops and interrupts the patient with the answer that he or she is trying to tell the doctor? How much time do we actually wait before we interrupt? The answer is not in minutes, it's sad, but it's actually 7 seconds. So in 7 seconds, I don't know if you knew this, Harvey, the typical clinician will interrupt the patient before he or she finished telling the doctor the answer to the question. So in other words, we're always aborting a possible answer that's coming down the road. We just don't have enough patience for it because we have confirmation bias. We a lot of times already diagnose the patient when we walk into the room with just a few vital signs or a certain situation.
I know. I chuckle because it's true. That's another of my pearls when I talk to when I onboard doctors. I'm saying do your best not to do that bedside diagnosis because unfortunately there's certain patterns. If a kid comes in with a cough in a certain time of year and it's a certain age, you're like, oh, it's croup. Even before you even go see the patient, they're already. And then to your point, it could be something else, not croup. So very well said. I really do appreciate that. I'm going to throw a non-medical question. This might be good for Brooks. This is from Prosper. He says, how can one get into AI consulting for companies as a clinical student with a background in Python programming and basic AI development? How technical should one get, Brooks?
Well, it really depends on what part you want to consult on. Do you want to consult on the patient-facing things? Do you want to consult on the back-end systems that clinicians are using at hospitals? But to just directly answer that question, I would say the best way would be to partner with an existing, physician that's interested in the field, and really start to determine what is like the lowest hanging scenario that would have the biggest impact on the patient population, as well as move the needle from what maybe the hospital system or the IDN would have in their ethos. Maybe it's a children's hospital. You want to focus on specific pockets of an area, maybe different part of the country that you're in, and what types of problems that they're facing, and really work backwards from that.
Thank you. All right, the next question is from Michael Mann, and I'm sorry about that background noise. It'll stop here in a sec. The question is, as more practices adopt AI to support diagnostic and clinical decision-making, how can physicians maintain trust, communicate transparently, and protect themselves legally? And should empathy training now include how to talk to patients about AI? Thank you, Michael.
Well, there's actually 4 questions, but I'll do my best. I think in certain areas, particularly right now in the imaging, and I think soon decision support, we're sort of transitioning from AI being looked upon by clinicians as a GPS, kind of nice to have, that support, but not entirely necessary and not 100% correct, right? Sometimes a GPS will have an error in terms of recommending a certain route, but but less and less frequent certainly than before. I think we're transitioning from AI as a GPS in certain situations to AI as a safety belt. And by that, I mean, I think soon in some areas, and particularly imaging right now, but soon in decision support, you're going to be liable if you don't use a mature AI tool to help you make a decision. Let me give you an example. One of the most commonly misdiagnoses that have had the privilege of defending or refuting the claim is something called Kawasaki disease, which is a high fever for a number of days illness in young children. The reason you can't miss that is because they have coronary artery problems, and that's unfortunately something I have to deal with. So it's not uncommon that in an ER, especially in the ER that doesn't see a high volume of children, and I think Harvey can probably attest to this, that a child comes in with having high fever for 3, 4, 5 days, and no one's really thinking that this could be Kawasaki disease. Everyone is thinking this is some viral illness, especially if there's a cough and some conjunctivitis, that this is a viral illness, and just follow up with the pediatricians, usually the recommendation, and make sure you hydrate. But no one's really thinking Kawasaki disease could be a strong possibility because they probably haven't seen a child with Kawasaki disease to be really remembering that disease as a category. So what happens is then the child goes home, comes back again. Here's a typical scenario. Comes back 3 or 4 days later, still with high fever. So now we're day 5 or more of high fever. And once again, they sent the child home with, antipyretics and hydration as a recommendation and follow up with the pediatrician. And then 10 days later, we realize as there's more of a rash and more skin peeling, which are typical characteristics of Kawasaki disease, that this child had Kawasaki disease now with very significant coronary artery complications, because the to really decrease the possibility of coronary artery disease, you need to provide intravenous gamma globulins very early. So now there's a complication. If you're lucky, the child survives. If you're not so lucky, the child succumbs to the coronary complications potentially and dies. So even if the child doesn't die but has significant coronary complications, the parents may just say, well, I came to the emergency room twice, and the third time they finally thought this could be Kawasaki disease, and now they're going to sue for damages. So I'm thinking that in the future, hopefully, Harvey and Brooks, that we'll have AI tools that will say, hey, this child had high fever for 3 or 4 days, high risk age for Kawasaki disease. Have you considered Kawasaki disease, i.e., should you call a cardiologist to see this child, and should you have an echocardiogram done? So these are relatively simple interventions that are not invasive. But if no one's thinking Kawasaki disease, then the child's going to succumb to the complications almost for sure. So I'm hoping AI tools will level the playing field in terms of everyone's capability to make the common diagnoses and not miss them. And we may have family members or ourselves have a diagnosis that was missed or mismanaged because of because the timely diagnosis wasn't done.
Yeah. This reminds me, there's a friend of mine. He's a lawyer, he's a doctor, and he's been working on a risk management tool now, probably like over 30 years. And he was telling me his goal is to incorporate that into the EMR to do exactly what you just said. And I thought, man, that's so good, because at the end of the day, unfortunately or fortunately, we're human. And at 2 a.m, I may not be at my best, but if I have these tools, like you said, to throw a flag and be like, hey, this person, have you considered Kawasaki's disease? And it's like, oh my gosh, I actually didn't. So thank you. Just because we're on Zoom and I like showing stuff off, in the near future, we are going to have these smart glasses, and these smart glasses will have a screen on here. And to Dr. Chang's point, we will be able to have a conversation with the patient. And let's just take it, even I think a year from now, it will be able to give me that emotional intelligence when I'm talking to the patient, be like, your patient, the way they said XYZ, and it may tell me, but more importantly, it could, on the screen could tell me, hey, this person may have Kawasaki's disease and give me the differential diagnosis, or I can have an open conversation and they could tell me everything in my ear. So pretty exciting stuff, these smart glasses. I'm gonna jump to the next question.
Hey, Harvey.
Yes, sir.
Harvey, can I just come back to some of this? I still think even with the tech, let's say 5, 10 years from now, everyone has either glasses or just reminders on the EHR to say, hey, this patient is at risk for having Kawasaki disease, and you should consider that or work that up. I think ultimately, as the first question was referring to, your best protection is still having a really good dynamic relationship with your patients and families, and give them empathy and trust that's genuine, not like I'm going to pretend to be really nice so that I don't get sued. And the patients and families are too smart for that, by the way. They can figure that out. So just be genuinely compassionate, empathetic, and caring and detail oriented. Even with all the technology that can perhaps curb the incidence of having a malpractice legal suit, it still comes down to the human interaction. That's the best protection. Of course, your chance of getting sued will be less if you can have these tools, but ultimately, it still comes down to the relationship you have with the patient and the family.
Well said. This is more of a statement than a question, I believe. It says AI for speech recognition and auto-populating the EMR has become very popular. Microsoft has spent $16 billion for the nuisance technology that performs this for physicians. So yeah, that Dragonfly and all that, it's pretty interesting. And it's gotten better from when I was in med school days. This one's kind of interesting. This is from Roy Vela. He says, unlike in chess, so far in studies reading radiology scans, AI alone outperforms AI plus doctors because the doctors who know better overrule the AI. And so let me start with this, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm going to start by saying this is why I think it's so important to really be bilingual, be able to know medicine and know AI. And this is why I'm biasly going to say you should try Dr. Chang's course, because we need to understand these tools. We need to know the background so that we can know when we should step into AI or when not. Add in that wisdom, that clinical gestalt, years of experience that you have, but then leverage that with AI so you know when to use AI or not. So, Dr. Chang, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because before we always just assume that AI plus humans got to be the best combination. There are lots of talks that talk about that synergy between doctors and or humans and AI in general that will lead to a better result. But in fact, that's not true. Only if the human and the AI have a good relationship, mutually trusting relationship, will the result of the output from AI plus human be better than either human or AI alone. So it's a lot more sophisticated than a general rule that AI plus humans gotta be better. That might be good for chess, Harvey, but it's not going to be good enough for healthcare. The trust has to be really there on both sides. So in other words, you can have AI supplementing a clinician, but if the clinician doesn't trust the AI or has a non-synergistic relationship, then the result could actually be worse than humans alone or AI alone. So the synergy there between AI and human has to be a healthy, trusting relationship where there's a lot of trust but verify kind of attitude on both sides.
And I'm gonna biasly say about 2 weeks ago, this is just random. I wrote this math equation, and it goes through when human plus AI equal plus trust can beat AI, and it goes through all the different algorithms. I came up with like 7 different ways. So check out that post. I think it's pretty good. Biasly, I wrote it, but I think it is because it makes you think, okay, in this scenario it would work. Okay, in this scenario it wouldn't. So anyway, just wanted to share that, and I put the link in the comments.
The other thing I want to add in terms of the human plus AI, and I know Harvey and Brooks knows this is how I feel, is do the thinking first on your own. Because if you over rely on what AI is going to tell you, you may just skip over your own cognition. And that's dangerous in healthcare. Because yes, AI is pretty good. And I would say some of the tools I use now, Harvey and Brooks, are at the junior attending level. Is so good that it's beyond a trainee level now. So, and that's going to be even more dangerous because you're going to say, wow, this is pretty good. It's better than how I expect some other doctors would do. So I'm going to really trust it more and more. And that's when you let your guard down. So I
Mhm.
think you should, with any case, and this is what I do, I just don't talk the talk here. I walk the walk. So I will try to come up with my own differential diagnosis first, and then use the AI tool as a smart, book smart, not street smart, a very book smart, clinician who knows a lot and scored 99th percentile on the boards, but may not have street smart. They'll recommend, for instance, they may recommend 3 imaging studies, and you as a seasoned clinician may know that you only need really one of those 3, not all 3. So
Yeah.
it's you have to add the street smart to the book smart, but do the street smart thinking first, and then use the AI as a additional voice after you've thought it through. And that's the same with any creative content too. I always try to write something first and then use AI as a secondary, opinion. And then I put my own original writing into the AI and say, critique this. And then the third product is the end result of both. So then you come up with, I think, the best combination.
Yeah, I agree. And I just want to add to that. I mean, think about it. It's like a muscle, right? If you don't work out, you're going to lose that muscle and it's going to atrophy. And there's some actual interesting studies now that our brain is changing because we're using AI. And not to go down that rabbit hole, but I just want to plant the seed that children's brains haven't developed. And let's just say if their brain doesn't fully develop, I'm going to call it 25, and they're using AI, then I'm going to argue
Yeah.
that part of their neuroplasticity is going to change. And my argument is biasly that Dr. Chang's brain and mine are better leveraged in this world because our brain has already been formed. We made those neural synapses and we're solid. And now we're adding AI and we're able to use both. And my argument is that some of the newer population is going to form their brain
Yeah.
differently. And as a result, we'll see things differently. And that'll bring in the bias. I really worry that one day Dr. Chang and I are going to be taken care by some individual that will trust AI too much, will not use their brain. They will use the AI to the point where they trust the AI more than themselves. And ironically, I always joke around saying I probably still be a doctor when I'm 90.
Well, I think we can still do better than AI, although AI, as Brooks can attest to, is catching up in those areas. I think common sense. So they start with the 3 C's: the common sense, the cognition, i.e., clinical reasoning, clinical judgment, and I think also critical thinking are still missing, and creativity, right? So you might be able to be particularly innovative with a treatment because it's not reported or described on the internet. The training set is not going to be able to tell you that. So sometimes creativity still matters a great deal in any field, not just healthcare.
Agree. Well, we got 15 minutes. I want to make sure we hit these last questions. One is a statement: AI will always need human oversight. The best AI accuracy ranges top out around 92%. So thank you. And then I actually like this one. So thanks for
I like
putting
the
this.
opposite too, Harvey. Can I just interrupt? I like the
Yes, please.
opposite too. We humans need to be humble, and I think Brooks will agree. We humans need to be humble, because AI can call out our mistakes or our lack of awareness of certain situations, right, Brooks?
It can absolutely. And I think the interesting thing we're going to start seeing is, we already see subspecialties in rural hospital environments having a remote doc come in and take a look at things, and having some additional AI output while they're there to give them some better context. I think is going to really help to push that up and make that standard of care even higher. But at the same time, there's so much governance that needs to happen around how well is the AI performing versus Dr. A versus Dr. B, and really start to tease that out and see how that goes. I think in the next couple of years we're going to be really surprised in how well these tools are accurately providing consistent answers, to the point where maybe it's more consistent than your typical doc, especially if he's been on shift or she's been on shift for 20 hours.
And not to continue the ER doc theme here, but When was the last time an ER doc will ask you about family history or travel history? It's a question that's often skipped, right? So perhaps the intake process, if you're an emergency room patient, can just include those questions automatically so that the clinician doesn't always have to remember to ask those questions.
Agree. And I'll make sure to take some extra Xanax after this talk. I'm an ER doctor, by the way, so those of you that don't know. But no joking aside, I actually like this question. She says, if your signature is on the line, regardless of AI, you are the professional are responsible. When
Yeah.
adopting AI, read your vendor agreements. And oh my gosh, that is so important. And
Great.
I'd love to see what you think, Dr. Chang, on the vendor agreement portion.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a whole new discussion about vendors and what you do with them. But yeah, I agree. Ultimately, right now, just like the loss of robotics from Isaac Asimov, you're ultimately still responsible as a human being. And but hopefully AI doesn't try to intentionally hurt you, but you ultimately is responsible. There's a certain clause that came from the devices and the drugs, and I think it's going to apply to AI, which is the um, um, learned intermediary clause for these things. That means a clinician cannot claim as a defense that you really don't understand AI. So you signed, your hospital signed this AI service, and you didn't understand the AI aspect, and you made a mistake because of the AI service recommending a certain thing. You cannot claim ignorance. You have to, if you use it, you have to learn enough about it so that you know how to interpret, whatever the AI service is providing you. So you have to learn, just like with drugs and devices, right? You don't have to know the engineering aspects of a device or the pharmaceutical aspects of a drug, but you have to know enough to know whether or not you should use it in the first place and whether or not you're ready to explain the potential side effects or the complications to your patients and families.
Yeah, well said. Kind of like the mechanism of Tylenol. We don't
Yeah.
know how it works, but we use it all the time. It's kind of
Yeah.
interesting. And so I love that we're getting people from all over the world. So in the chat, just put where you're from, and I just got a shout out. Thank you. We have someone from Brazil. So fala português un pouco. So that's all I know, by the way. Just kidding. Anyway, so thanks for joining us. And then I want to take advantage, Brooks. Is there anything you want to tell us? I know we only got like 12 minutes left. There's anything that in your mind you're like, oh my gosh, I really want people to know X or Y?
Well, something interesting came to mind, and that was when you were showing the recording device. Currently, these AI models, there's been a lot of back and forth with them, but sometimes, right, if there's like no talking at all, it'll start just kind of guessing or making things up in the background of what it thinks that things are saying. And as more people start to rely on these things, the accuracy of that transcription is going to be really key and important. And I just don't think that they're quite there yet, to give you a consistent transcript that you can really rely on, especially if it's going to be going back into the medical record somehow. Even if a patient's wearing it, maybe they're using that to remember, oh, doc said to do this or take this at this time every day. I think it's really important to realize that it's possible that it may not make it things up, right? It may not be the most accurate thing that was there. So don't completely rely on it yet, because we're just not quite there yet.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate it. And then a shout out to Diane from Ireland. Sweet. I'm going to be in Denmark in August. And shout out to Prosper from Nigeria. Oh, man. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you guys showing up from different parts of the world and throughout the U.S. Dr. Chang, is there anything else you kind of want to jump on in the last 11 minutes or 10 minutes that you want to make sure we tell people or share?
Yeah, I think this is a really exciting time for healthcare, particularly if you get more knowledgeable about AI and how to use AI strategically and intelligently. It's a very exciting time. It will definitely help lower your chances of potential malpractice suits. It will allow you to understand medicine and law better. And this is the best time. And if you're not sure about certain things, ask your favorite LLM the question and iteratively prompt and until you get a good answer. And also another helpful prompt, and when you use an LLM in a clinical or non-clinical situation, is frame it so that it can be more helpful. For instance, say you're an ER clinician and you're seeing this child with 5 days of high fever. What could be happening, and then keep asking your large language model until it gives you a very complete and good answer that satisfies you.
Very well said. And I think next episode, what we're going to do is it'll be the third Friday of the month, so in about a month from now. And then we'll make sure to pick on another specialty, not ER docs, on the next one. Just kidding. But yeah, what else can we share? Can we introduce yeah, there we go. Do you want to talk about MedLegal AI advice from medops.ai, Dr. Chang?
Yeah, we Harvey Brooks and I thought, well, we should. Lots of doctors are in the medical legal area, being expert witnesses, and hopefully not at the receiving end of a malpractice suit. But if they are, then we need to better inform doctors. So we put together a large language model tool that can be very helpful. If you're a lawyer, if you're an expert witness, or if you're a clinician that just wants to know more about medical legal work and how to protect yourself, we have a medical legal tool that's available that you can use. And we can discuss this offline with you in person if you like. But I think I would encourage everyone to think about how you would get more educated in this area. And I put in my 35 years of experience into a large language model tool so you can take advantage of that and learn that way too. Again, medical legal work is a little bit daunting, but I think I would encourage everyone to get into it because um, these medical legal cases really do need experts on both sides. And you learn a lot about yourself, you learn about your practice, you learn about the law, and you learn about how to become a better doctor. So I strongly recommend that you just get some resource to help you.
Yeah, well said. And I'll say it again. My favorite phrase is "We don't know what we don't know," and honestly, these tools help us see things that we didn't. If I could leverage Dr. Chang when I started my early profession, it'd be worth so much to me personally, just to be able to get that wisdom and then leverage AI and call it his digital twin. If I could, really just talk to him, and it could be 2 a.m. in the ER, that I can't talk to someone, and I could, say, hey, XYZ. It's just that wisdom is worth so much, and I've been blessed to be part of his course, and he does it every month. And every month I'm learning every single time. So it's life learning, and the more you do it, the better. And I personally appreciate everybody being here. And we have a few last minutes. If there's any quick questions, feel free to ask. And then, do you guys have any other parting thoughts, guys, before we take off?
Well, there was a question earlier about how can you get involved from an AI perspective, and the ABAIM course. I've actually taken it; it's really good. Gives you access to some office hours after you graduate from the course, but there's really some really great technical nuggets in there. It goes really deep into how AI works and where it came from, but then also how to apply it. And it's taught by Dr. Chang and many other docs that really great experience, especially from the intersection of AI and healthcare. So I'd recommend anybody that hasn't taken this course to just check it out. It's really, I found it extremely helpful.
Thanks.
And I'm gonna ask for a solid. If you guys don't mind sharing this post, if not, tag some friends that you think, oh man, they really should hear this this LinkedIn Live. That would be huge from us. We'd really appreciate it. And obviously, follow all three of us. We're constantly posting and doing. And I know I'm excited about Dr. Chang's conference coming up in November. So check it out. It's gonna be really good. So I don't know. I don't have anything else. I really wanted to say thank you. I'll hopefully see you in a month. Oh, and then the other thing is I'm going to ask Brooks to help me try to get the transcription for this, and then use AI to create some cool summary points, and then we'll post that along with this link. Anything else, Doc and Brooks?
No, I think in the era of AI, we have to really define our humanness more than ever before. So focus on your patients and families. For those of us who are clinicians, spend time with them, show them genuine empathy, and redefine perhaps how you practice for the better. I think it's the best time. And if you need an AI tool to critique you, which I think they're available, critique you and your interactions, I think that's a really good time because you are trying very hard, but perhaps you had a bad day or you're tired towards the end of the day, and you may not be as empathetic or understanding or transparent as you like. And that's when you're medical legally the most vulnerable, is in your weak area times. And how to better protect yourself is a good way to think about how to do this.
Yeah, well said. All righty. So I guess thank you again from all three of us. We appreciate it. And then we'll see you in about a month.
Thank you all.